My name is Justus Knight. This is Restricted Republic. Welcome back to the broadcast. And you know there is nothing I enjoy doing more than exposing the misinformation provided to you by mainstream media news sources. There is one story so large, so gargantuan, that everyone should be focused on it because it affects millions on top of millions on top of millions of lives. But of course, we're too embattled in political battles to pay attention to what really matters. Water, food. But in this case, we're going to focus on water because one of the biggest misinformation campaigns you have been reading about involves images around Lake Mead. Well, now, I'm here to expose the real story. Has this been a man-made disaster? I'm going to explain why. There's more to that story than anyone imagines, and I'm going to give you the basis behind that statement in very short order. Now, a huge favor, if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, what are you waiting for? It's just a click away. And also, help me share the video. It's truly the way the word gets out, so people could be informed about what's happening, so we could finally make real decisions, not based on paranoia and not based on overinflated headlines, but rather the reality of what's happening in the world around us. I put up a membership platform here. If you can join, that helps to support me to bring you new broadcasts. You notice I don't have any sponsors. Or another means of supporting me is at restrictedrepublic.com, where we carry on with more news on a daily basis, fully referenced, fully researched, no commercials, no interruptions. Lisa, Haven, and I, and we're about to add another broadcaster into the mix at restrictedrepublic.com. You get there today, use discount code REALJOURNALISM. That's going to get you $3.99 a month for 2 years. There's a recession on top of us. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. We're going to see you through that, and we're going to give you 14 days for free simply for checking out the platform, restrictedrepublic.com, Real Journalism, in monthly discount code at checkout. Now let's get back to this broadcast. So we've seen the headlines and you've read them. Why is Lake Mead shrinking? Climate change is a major reason. Or headlines like this from NASA: Lake Mead keeps dropping. They provided us imagery and satellite imagery to watch the very dramatic change that's happening. This is something that needs to be watched. No one is disagreeing with that. But when you're going to watch something, you have to stay based in facts. It's the only way to resolve such a serious issue for so many millions of people. You've seen these graphs, Lake Mead monthly elevation at Hoover Dam dropping dramatically. You've seen the photos, the basins allegedly emptying out now. Or according to this statement in that NASA article, declining water levels due to climate change and 20 years of ongoing drought have reshaped the park's shorelines. So when we're talking about basins and the Colorado River Compact, you have to know the states involved: Utah, Wyoming, Colorado, Nevada, California, Arizona, and New Mexico. So we can get again to the factual basis behind what's occurring. The Colorado River and its tributaries provide water to nearly 40 million people for municipal use, supply water to irrigate nearly 5.5 million acres of land, and is the lifeblood for at least 22 federally recognized tribes, 7 national wildlife refuges, 4 national recreation areas, and 11 national parks. This is a monster issue if water was to run out. But then you study other charts and you see climate model yearly precipitation concerning the Colorado River and those upper and lower basins, but it doesn't quite reflect the story you're being told. And there's a reason for that, a very legitimate reason. It was an error in the very beginning, just before they signed the compact. Colorado River natural flows into Lake Mead. You see somewhat of stability within that chart, not a dramatic fall off, as many of the articles are alluding to climate change specifically. However, this chart does not show that. The baseline remaining somewhat steady. This is at Lee's Ferry, which is one of the major measuring points for Lake Mead, for the dam, and for what's coming of the upper and lower basins. So let's go into some more reality now. California's water usage was built on a historic lie. The cost is now apparent. Another picture of Lake Mead. You see that receding water line. Everybody instilling panic. And I'm not saying it's something we don't need to be extremely concerned about, but we need real resolution over overinflated, misinformed headlines. If we'd cut water use in the Colorado River over the last 2 decades to what we now understand to be the actual levels of water available, the crisis wouldn't be nearly as bad. That from Peter Glick of the Pacific Institute, the co-founder of that. What we now understand to be the actual levels of water availability, what does that mean exactly? Well, he states the compact was built on a lie about the capacity of the Colorado River to serve the interests of the western states, a lie that Westerners will be grappling with for decades to come. It should be the paramount story. It should be being dealt with by government right now. We should be hearing it every day, but no, we're hearing about Trump and Biden every day. Don't worry about water for millions of people. Let's worry about Trump and Biden. The crisis of water supply from the Colorado is vividly represented by the so-called bathtub ring around Lake Mead, that white area you see. The vast reservoir behind Hoover Dam showing how far below normal the water level has fallen. Of course, people are screaming climate change. The real flaw in the compact was no joke, however. Davis figures was a flagrant overestimation. And he certainly knew, having studied the Colorado for decades, but they wanted to make sure water rights were extended to other states like California, and by the way, some of this water flowing into Mexico also. How did he do this? He provided an estimate that the river's annual volume averaged 16.4 million acre feet. That's how many gallons per 1 acre foot. Enough water to serve 1 or 2 average households today. Allegedly. However, they really never realized that number. Only around compact signing. They didn't take in the cyclical nature of nature. The least varied gauged flow record. And we could drop into their chart, or I'm going to give you a little bit more detailed of a chart. And if you drop back into 1920, 1925, you'll see it was approximately what they estimated, 16.25 or so. But never hit that again. It was a flawed model. Well, we've been hearing a lot about flawed models lately. So in 1930, 1940, do you think they would have attempted to adjust for that? To start taking remedy? Well, here we are today. No remedy being taken. Well, cutbacks for certain states, but not one in particular. This was signed in 1922. This is the compact itself. So again, looking at the chart, 1922, you see almost peak water levels that would again never be realized in any long-term scenario. Again, there was already an issue. Lake Mead would already start to drain. This does not have to do exclusively with climate change. It has to do with man-made flawed models. The 1899 to 1921 time span on which his figure was based was one of the wettest periods in the basin's known history. Indeed, only 4 times since construction of Hoover Dam began in 1931 has the 10-year average reached a 16.4 million acre feet. But something else has changed on top of this. What you're looking at there is the population growth from 1900 to today in California and Arizona and Nevada. So a supply that never met what they predicted it would be on top of a rapid population escalation. Flawed models. Colorado River water cutback. Well, for everyone except California. The verdict is especially high stakes for Southern California, where the river provides a quarter or a third of the region's water supply. 7 Southern California counties rely on the river for water and hydroelectric power. One of the primary drivers in the Green Initiative. I should say one of the drivers in the Green Initiative. The Colorado River and its tributaries cut through 7 U.S. states and Mexico, from the river's headwaters in Colorado and Wyoming to where it trickled towards through rarely actually reaches the Gulf of California. A century of deals, acts, and legal decisions have carved up 15 million acre feet between Colorado, Wyoming, Utah, and New Mexico in the upper basin, and California and Arizona and Nevada in the lower basin. Native American tribes hold rights to water as well, and the 1944 treaty set aside another 1.5 million acre feet for Mexico. The problem is there wasn't enough water for any of this. Remembering the compact modeling was flawed. The prediction of how much water was available. And now with the population escalation and the move into hydroelectric power, wind power, and everything else is, well, consuming more water. What are the top energy sources in California? As a result, solar and wind now account for nearly 38% of the state's electricity generation, followed closely by natural gas with 37%. Interestingly, California also has the second largest conventional hydroelectric generating capacity in the U.S. after Washington State. I know, but Justice, they use the water after generating hydroelectric capacity. If they were retaining all the water, that'd be a very good argument. But unfortunately, well, on top of the population growth, any excess usage whatsoever or runoff whatsoever or availability to evaporation on a flawed model is going to cause a man-made, miscalculated disaster. And it's now what we face if they don't start to take the necessary to change usage. But by 2060, you're seeing California is going to have even more hydroelectric power, which means more diversion of the tributaries, which means more evaporation, and based on current modeling, more population, which is only going to expand the problem. It's kind of funny. It's almost ironic in the fact that issues and ways to try to resolve climate change is causing a man-made disaster. Doesn't need to necessarily, and I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm not going against any of the narratives, but nuclear power, which is being diminished in California, is in my opinion, one of the safest energy sources, is being replaced by wind and hydroelectric. But isn't it more important that we have water to drink? Just a thought process there, especially when you have an alternative for energy. Even though you may not personally agree with it, I personally disagree with the fact that I can't have drinking water. And it's not being remedied by any of the powers that be. We can go through forecast after forecast, model after model, but on top of all that, to add insult to injury, California is currently exceeding their approved allotment. On top of a reducing Lake Mead, on top of a loss in what was predicted to be available supply. My friends, this is beyond imagination, but mainstream media doesn't cover this that way. Of course they don't. This is statistics, facts, figures, provided by the bureaus of land management and everybody who has to monitor this stuff while they're watching articles like Forbes come out that aren't declaring what happens, but here's what happens. From the Reclamation Managed Water in the West, the Colorado River Basin Water Supply and Demand Study. Here's what happens. Your supply goes below your demand. I know, very difficult concept. It obviously is for many involved in this. When demand exceeds supply, you diminish supply on a flawed model. With not enough water available to begin with, on top of rapid population growth, on top of other uses for that water other than keeping us alive, well, you start to see why we here enjoy so much bringing to you the simple basis behind what's actually happening, and all we're looking for is someone like the American Spectator who publishes Lake Mead is draining, not climate changing. Is it contributing? I'm not here to dismiss on some percentage based on the current seasonality. That's not true, but it's not the driving factor. Those factors adjust over time. And when they did this study, they were at their peak of water supply. And right now, well, we're not. Flawed, man-made, flawed modeling is creating a disaster that if we addressed head-on for the actual statistics and facts, we could start to mitigate. But no, rather it's just easier to cut back everybody else. So the person who's using the most can continue to get that water when they have alternatives to help us preserve it. That's how simple this is. I love you all. Can't thank you enough for being here today. Make sure you join Lisa over at restrictedrepublic.com. She's going to air an exclusive video in just, well, probably a couple hours from now. Until next time, again, we love you all. Godspeed and God bless. Justus Knight, signing out.